My husband planned a dinner with his ex, made me feel like the rebound, and now our marriage is falling apart. Original post. Throwaway account. I really need input from people who don't know us, so their opinions aren't biased. I'm very emotional and tired, so I apologize in advance for any typos. My husband, Jack, male, 36, used to date Emma, female, 34, for years. They broke up because Jack didn't want to get married or have kids. Emma moved away, and about a month later, Jack met me, 30. I don't look like the typical girls Jack had been dating. For example, Emma is super tall, blonde with blue eyes, and has a PhD. I'm petite, 110 pounds and short. I'm a nurse, I have dark curly hair, and I'm an introvert. Apparently, she was a social butterfly. Jack has a group of friends that he's known since childhood. They are like brothers to him, but from the very beginning, they didn't like me. They still call me the rebound girl. At our wedding, during his best man speech, he joked, "We all thought rebound girls were temporary, but our brother Jack made an honest woman out of her." Everyone laughed. I didn't. They also joke that I'm just a nurse, and that Jack downgraded, since he has a PhD, technically postdoctoral. From a doctor to just a nurse. For my own sanity, I ignore them, and Jack still hangs out with them regularly. Last weekend, there was a fundraising gala, and Emma was there. I saw her for the first time in person. Jack introduced me, and Emma said, "Yeah, I know who she is." The guys weren't kidding when they described her, haha. Jack quickly changed the topic and asked how long she was in town. She said for a week, and then they ended up chatting all night, reminiscing about old times. I decided to talk to other people. Later, at bedtime, Jack mentioned that he should go out to dinner with Emma. I assumed he meant inviting her over, so I asked what kind of food she likes so I could make it. He said no, it would just be the two of them. I asked, like a date? And he replied, no, just two friends going to dinner. Why are you so insecure? I asked him, do you miss her? Do you miss being with her? He said, I'm not going to lie, it felt great talking to her tonight. There's just something about her. I got really upset and told him he can do whatever he wants, but if he goes on this dinner date, I'm done. He thinks I'm overreacting and being insecure. So, wise people of Reddit, is this rebound girl overreacting? Update. It's 4:45 a.m., and I didn't sleep last night. I thought I'd post an update. I decided to stay awake and talk to him when he came home. When he did, I told him, I could have tracked your location, shown up at the restaurant, and done so many things to get my answer. But I'd like to believe you have enough respect for me to tell me. Were you on a dinner date with your friends or Emma? He showed me pictures and said, no, it was all of us, me, my friends, and Emma. I was stupid enough to feel relieved, even feeling bad for accusing him. Then he told me to sit down because we needed to talk. He said that after seeing Emma at the gala, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He decided to take Monday and Tuesday, yesterday, off and spent the whole day with her, while I assumed he was at work. He went on about how strong their connection was, how they couldn't stop talking, and how much he enjoyed being with her. He told me I'm a sweet woman, but he never felt that spark with me. He said that at dinner, Emma was laughing and having fun with everyone, and it felt like old times, compared to me being quiet and uncomfortable around his friends. He said it's best if we go our separate ways. I asked him if they had sex, and he didn't reply. I asked again and again, but he still wouldn't answer. I was so upset and asked, why did you marry me if you're not over her? He said he thought I was the one, but these past 2 days made him realize there's no spark between us. He kept going on about how sweet I am and that I'll find someone too. I told him to shut up. I said, Emma knew about your cancer treatments. Where was she when you needed a friend? Why didn't she ever call you back then? He went quiet. I feel stupid for ignoring all the red flags over the years and wasting 6 years of my life with him. My next step is hiring a lawyer and finding my own place. I feel so numb right now. I'm going to contact my brother to help me. Thank you everyone. Can Specs brings guest for sleepover if his name on the house title October 23, 2024. I will see a lawyer soon. My ex and I got into a huge argument tonight. We share a house that we are currently living in. He sleeps in our bedroom, I sleep in the spare room. He told me tonight that he wants his girlfriend to stay with him, yes, at our house, while she is in town. Can I legally call the police to kick her out? Or since the house is under his name too, he can bring anyone and cops can't do anything. I suggested he moves out so he can invite whoever he wants, but he doesn't want to pay mortgage for our current house and rent, for a place he would be staying. Update 3. So many people have asked for an update. There isn't much to share except that my ex has been extremely difficult. He and his affair partner, AP, took time off work. They are traveling and having fun. He refuses to respond to or acknowledge me. I no longer have access to his money. I'm working extra shifts to cover the mortgage. I've met with 2 lawyers, but I realized I can't afford their fees. Thankfully, I have access to free legal advice sessions through my Employee Assistance Program, EAP, at work, so I'm currently on the waiting list for it. I'm planning to send him the bill for half of the house expenses since we separated. Meanwhile, he's out traveling, and I'm working overtime to pay the mortgage. I can't put the house on the market because I need his signature on the papers too. So, basically, no real update on my situation. His family has pretty much ghosted me. His mom initially acted sympathetic but then stopped replying. His friends never liked me, so that isn't much of a surprise. On the bright side, I do have an empty house now. I love how quiet and peaceful it is. I can cry for hours without worrying that anyone will see me. Edit. Yes, Emma knows he can't get her pregnant. I thought I was clever by telling her. Their long-term plan is either adoption or using a sperm donor IVF. I felt disgusted hearing about it because adoption was our plan. Now, it's his and her plan. I am not the original poster. Please don't contact or comment on linked posts. Now to the next story, story 2. My cousin asked my daughter to perform at her wedding, but after her success, she became jealous and posted negatively about her online. Original post. I hope this is okay to share here. The reason I'm posting is because of my daughter who's been hurting in the aftermath of a recent performance. I'm sorry in advance for how long this turned out, but any advice from fellow aerialists would be greatly appreciated. My cousin Dana, not real name, had her wedding 2 weeks ago, and she asked if my daughter could perform at her reception. My daughter, Jane, also fake name, has practiced Silk's lyra for the past few years at a nearby circus studio, and she's also performed with and through the studio at small gigs. She hopes to continue into adulthood and become a professional teacher, but this recent incident has shaken her confidence. She has a private Instagram to document her progress, shot performances, and I only post certain performances on my Facebook. Her first gig with the studio and her first recital to name a few we're proud of. Some of our relatives saw her performances through my socials, and they watched her perform at her studio's Christmas recital when we hosted Christmas at our home a few years back. Something that surprised her when they visited early to see her. I love how they coordinated that, and Jane said it was her loudest cheering section to date. Dana was one of the relatives who came up early to see her Christmas recital, and she's always been super supportive. She asked me if Jane would be willing to perform at the reception, and I asked on her behalf. Jane was honored and excited when I did, and we already had a portable rig for her too. Though we ended up renting a taller one from her studio. Dana got the idea from a YouTube video featuring an aerialist who performed at a wedding reception, and she showed us while requesting white silks and a white outfit. We scoped out the venue and purchased white silks along with a white costume that Dana approved of, and Jane was really excited throughout. Jane even worked on choreography to a song that Dana requested, and she put a lot of time into it, even asking one of her coaches to help her with it. Dana insisted on paying her for the gig despite Jane not expecting to be paid, and she paid her a few hundred. However, Dana's had a change of heart. Jane received a standing ovation after her performance that surprised her, but we didn't know anything was wrong until Dana went on Facebook a few days later. Dana said she didn't approve of the outfit Jane wore and that she specifically told her to not wear white. She also said my husband and I pressured her to have Jane perform and that the performance gave off an unclassy vibe, lies that my husband and I couldn't believe. We sent Dana numerous costume links, and we purchased the one she liked. There was also nothing wrong with Jane's performance. Dana was one of the people cheering afterward. Jane received nothing but compliments afterward, but I'm disgusted that she had to see that post after all the work she put into it. The post also had comments disabled for what it's worth. I called Dana to confront her about the lies, but she didn't pick up numerous calls. I then called her parents who, like us, had received messages about her post, and they said that Dana was wrong. They apologized on her behalf and said they were also disgusted. Dana's mom also said that Dana vented to her before making her post a few days after the reception. Dana told her she regretted asking Jane to perform given the attention, compliments and cheers she received for it. Her mom also said that she felt upstaged with Jane wearing white and having to hear how good she was. Dana's parents tried to call her after she made her post, but she didn't answer after their previous conversation ended with her parents telling her she shouldn't be bitter because she specifically asked Jane to perform. Dana's parents reported the post along with us others, and we've told the truth to those who reached out along with a post to explain our side, stand up for Jane. We have text proof of sending costume links that Dana chose from. Dana's parents also requested to talk to Jane on the phone to apologize for Dana's behavior, And my husband and I told Jane that Dana was wrong, and that we'll be distancing ourselves from Dana permanently. Dana's parents were surprised at her behavior, and we were too, having seen her grow up. Granted, we only see extended family for Thanksgiving and Christmas because we live far, but other relatives were surprised too, as it seemed to come from left field. Maybe there's a side of Dana we'll never know from our limited holiday milestone interactions, but our focus is Jane. We've tried to cheer Jane up by offering to take her to dinner among other activities, but she's been hurting, which is why I'm here. Jane hasn't practiced, at home or the studio, since the reception, and I don't want to invade her space at her studio by telling anyone there, in case she doesn't want anyone to know. She asked me to return the white silks and costume after being so excited to receive them. She also said she's going to take an extended break from aerial photography to reconsider if she wants to continue. Aside from aerial photography, she's taken a break from seeing non-aerial friends too, choosing to pretty much keep to herself. We would appreciate any advice from fellow aerialists on how to lift her spirits. We remind her of how we're proud of her, along with the many compliments she received, but she's asked for space and to not talk about it. We're going to respect that and let time do its thing, but we'll consider any advice from other aerialists who can relate to the time and work she put in. Sorry for this being so long, but we appreciate anyone who reads and takes the time to reply. Comments from the first post. Leslie Barbnope. I always see aerialists in white at weddings. Take comfort in the internet OP, and hopefully they can use it as a defense with Dana. If she wants to be that way, just post the receipts of how she asked her what to wear, etc., if she's willing to say that for a 16-year-old. Or let it go, it'll pass, because I promise Dana, we'll have some new crazy thing to do very soon. These types always do. First update. Before I get into what's happened since my last post, I want to thank everyone who took the time to comment. 2 pieces of advice really stood out, and I'll get to them shortly. Since my original post, Dana's Facebook post is gone. I don't know if she deleted it or enough people reported it for Facebook to remove it, but we're glad it's gone. She never apologized to us, or Jane, or even bothered to call, so our position on being permanently done with Dana stands. My husband and I made a post on my Facebook addressing the lies she spewed about our daughter, and we shared photo proof of Dana's texts where she approved of Jane's white costume from links we sent, not to mention the song choice she sent us to. Better yet, Dana's mother reposted it on her account, which really surprised me. Dana's mother wrote that they loved Jane's act and that they disapproved of Dana's actions. My husband and I also made sure that Jane was okay with us addressing it on Facebook, and she said it was fine. Normally, I wouldn't use Facebook to address drama if aimed at me. But since this involves a grown adult attacking a minor, we felt the need to address it publicly because she disparaged her publicly, and Jane will remember whether we stood up for her or not years from now. I had a chance to speak with Dana's mother since my original post on the phone, and she spoke to Dana again after our last call. Dana reiterated how she regretted asking Jane to perform, but she harped on the standing ovation that bothered her the most. Dana told her that she expected Jane to get some polite applause, but that the overwhelming response really set her over the edge because she expected the loudest cheers to be when she and her husband entered the reception, but that went to Jane instead. Dana and her husband also received a great reception when they entered the reception, but Jane's performance did too, and Dana didn't expect it. Heck, even Jane was surprised by it too. She never received a standing ovation from a solo act before. But Dana's mother believes that if Dana had asked someone to sing who received a similar reception, Dana's jealousy would have been all the same. Someone suggested seeing if Jane would be interested in speaking to a therapist given how hurtful Dana's comments could be for a teen, and Jane said she's open to it so long as it isn't a counselor at school because, as of now, she doesn't want anyone at school or her studio to know about the incident, and she vaguely told the coach who helped her choreograph that it went fine. We will respect her privacy request as it's her right to control the narrative. But in the same vein, I suggested therapy for Dana to Dana's mother since her reaction might be a bigger insecurity, and she said she'd ask. The other thing someone suggested was the possibility of Dana's husband, or anyone, making an inappropriate comment to Jane during the reception that made her shut down and not want to see friends or practice days before Dana's post. My husband decided to ask her, and Jane said no when he did. If something happened, perhaps she'd be more comfortable telling a therapist with time. But on the bright side, she said she might want to try a different aerial studio because she doesn't want to answer questions about how it went, or share a video, at her home studio, so we will help her find somewhere new as she asked. We hope she doesn't permanently leave her current studio because she has friends and coaches who are supportive, and she performs with that studio's troupe at festivals gigs. But I personally understand the need to sometimes go somewhere where nobody knows you for a break, and we hope that that will help her. She hasn't said definitely yet. But if we do, we'll take her. She still wants an extended break from aerial photography in the meantime. But even if when she goes back, she said she may never want to perform again and would rather do it leisurely. One of the reasons she doesn't want to return to her home studio where she's a part of their troupe. She asked if we'd tell her troupe coach that she won't perform with them anymore if it comes to it. And if that's what she wants down the road, then we will. Hopefully time heals this wound and helps her at least keep the friends she has there, but we can only hope. Comments from the first Boru. Fleetsd. Other than Dana, it's really nice to see a bunch of adults behaving admirably in support of Jane. I hope Jane is able to heal and not lose something she's loved doing because of one mean-spirited individual. Dryaduanath. Yeah, it is truly weird how often, on this sub, we see people making excuses for or outright encouraging terrible behavior. This was a welcome change. Basic Bichette. Also, OOP didn't take this to an advice subreddit but to a subreddit dedicated to the sport. Cake for PM. Honestly, I do think that is key. It's a very specific subject and asking for advice from other performers. Karate and Pop-Tarts. This is the key. I'm an aerialist as well, and a member of the sub who's been following that story. We're a pretty small community and very, very protective of other aerialists, especially younger girls. It's also an inclusive sport and not super competitive, which I think lends to cooler heads. Slovenly Muse. This is a hugely important underlying fact, I think. That these people are all family. If Dana had hired an aerialist off of whatever Craigslist is now, they probably would have received polite applause that didn't upstage the bride. But Jane was family, and the guests were mostly family, which makes them extra excited to see a young person in the family doing so well, and they're not just impressed with her performance, they're proud of her. Hence the standing ovation. But this also means that when Dana lashes out at the aerialist, she's bad-mouthing Jane to Jane's own family. Her wedding guests are not going to automatically side with Dana, because they're Jane's family too. And with the receipts out there, this isn't going to go well for Dana at all. I guess you could see this as a lesson about keeping firm boundaries between personal and professional engagements, but really, I think the main takeaway here is to avoid marrying a crazy person whenever possible. Last update. When I tried to make each past post, they were immediately removed for some reason. Thus why I asked Madison Brave to post on my behalf after a few failed attempts on my original and update posts. I was able to make a post to my own profile stating that I gave Madison permission to post on my behalf. But when I tried to add this final update, my account was suspended as soon as I hit post, and I'm guessing I tried too many times to repost it along with the many attempts on my original and update too. I have since made a new account and reached out to the mods for assistance posting my last update after Madison suggested that I reach out to them instead of constantly reposting it previously, and they were gracious enough to help me. This is going to be the last time I update, and I want to thank everyone who gave advice. In my last post, I mentioned that Jane said she'd be open to talking to a professional so long as it wasn't anyone from her school, and we agreed to accommodate her. However, she changed her mind shortly after and said she wanted to talk to her coach instead, whom she had been brushing off since the reception and being vague about how it went. She and her coach put a lot of time into choreographing the act for Dana, and she didn't even charge her for the sessions to do so. Her coach is also part of her Circus Studios performing troupe, and she has always been supportive and understanding. We supported her decision to talk with her coach, and they did in person. It was after they spoke that Jane spoke to me following her coach's suggestion to do so, and I'm going to be somewhat vague about certain details of our discussion. She also asked to speak to me first before we'd talk to my husband afterward, and that's what we did. Jane opened up about how Dana sent a private message to her Instagram the day after the reception, but to her personal Instagram and not the private circus one. Dana's private message was just as bitter as her Facebook posts, but much more hurtful. Dana called Jane derogatory sexual terms in her message, and I can't express how angry my husband and I still are. Jane said she was surprised upon receiving the message. Dana was always supportive of her craft, and she gave her a standing ovation along with her husband. Looking back, Dana probably did because everyone else was doing so. But Dana also wrote that she only received the ovation because they were family who were biased, and couldn't tell the difference between a good and bad aerialist. Jane blocked Dana long before we spoke, and she said she was hurt because Dana was one of the relatives who came up for Christmas early when he hosted some years back to attend her studio's Christmas recital, which surprised her, and we all went out to dinner afterwards too. My husband and I tried our best to remind her that Dana's reaction was a reflection of her insecurities rather than anything Jane did. If the best man gave a speech that garnered the same reaction, Dana would have directed her vitriol at him. Jane said she understood that it wasn't her fault, but there was more in Dana's message that hurt her confidence, such as bodily comments that were disgusting. She said she may return to aerial at some point, but that she still needs time and is unsure about performing again compared to doing it leisurely. We told her, among other things, that we commended her decision to speak with her coach and that we'll respect her ultimate decision. Jane also said that she didn't tell us immediately because she wasn't sure if she wanted further drama with Dana if we told her parents about her message. However, after some time, she said she actually wanted us to tell them because she felt that Dana deserved repercussions for it. She said she was surprised that Dana's parents called her out publicly, on Facebook, without knowing about the message, so that made her feel comfortable with us telling them. Jane also saved a screenshot of Dana's message. And while we agreed to tell her parents, we suggested that she delete it afterwards because it's not good to carry around hurtful things. She's also still open to speaking to a professional about the other stuff in Dana's message that's more hurtful so long as it's no one from her school. We are in the process of trying to find a therapist who can help with some of the infidelities that led to her shutdown in the weeks after the performance. I honestly cannot thank her coach enough, but I just want to touch on a few more things that were suggested in the comments. I received a few DMs saying we were just as bad as Dana for addressing Dana's lies on Facebook, so I want to be clear. My husband and I rarely use Facebook. And if someone had started drama with me on a Facebook post, I wouldn't use Facebook to address it personally. I'd opt for a call instead. But since she disparaged a minor publicly with lies regarding costumes that we had text proof of her approving, we felt the need to post those messages proving that she signed off on them, and we asked Jane if she was okay with it first. The other thing a few people asked was whether her costume was potentially inappropriate. The costume we purchased came from a website that many professional circus performers use, including some who used to be in Cirque du Soleil and tagged the shop while wearing it on their socials. And we purchased other costumes from there in the past. Heck, some of their costumes have been used in wedding gigs by hired circus performers too. Jane's costume also received many compliments, but we're glad Jane realizes that she isn't responsible for Dana's insecurities. This was also Jane's first negative experience in her young performing career. Despite knowing Dana is entirely at fault, her words still hurt as they were close before this. Jane has kept in contact with her coach since, and she's even considering a different apparatus to take her mind off of silks that are temporarily tainted. We hope that time and therapy will help her with whatever she chooses, but her coach has also floated the idea of organizing a hangout with her troupe completely outside of aerial like a zipline, rope course day to get her mind off of it while seeing her friends, and she said she'd be open to it. Dana's parents also sent Sherry's berries for Jane, which was really sweet, and Jane sent them a text to thank them too. Regarding Dana's parents, I discussed the private message with Dana's mother, and she was even more disgusted than before. She said that she and her husband would deal with it and that there'd be permanent changes to their relationship with Dana until she apologizes and then some. She also apologized to us on her behalf and said she didn't raise her to be like that. But for what it's worth, even before we mentioned Dana's message, she told me that Dana's husband wasn't thrilled with her Facebook post among other things Dana complained about regarding the wedding, things that I had no clue about. She also said she's not sure if they'll be together much longer due to other things going on too, but I'll keep this to Jane only and hope that she comes back to aerial someday, or even a different apparatus if she chooses. Comments from the last update. We all love dogs. Geez, I'm so sorry your daughter had to deal with that horrible message on top of everything else. I am glad everyone but Dana seems to be behaving reasonably and trying to support Jane through this. Honestly, Dana's behavior kind of goes beyond insecure and mean, and into completely inexplicably evil territory. Not that you owe Dana anything, but, especially if she was previously kind and supportive to your daughter, Dana's parents should for sure look into trying to get her some professional help too. If there's been no indication at all of her being this cruel, out of control previously and it's seeming out of character to everyone who knows her, including her parents and husband, is there a legitimate chance that she's experiencing a real psychiatric problem? Obviously not your responsibility and not an excuse, but something that those who care about her might want to consider.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My mom remarried, brought in her husband and stepdaughter, who insulted me and damaged my things. Now, they seized my house during my trip. It never occurred to me, 27 degrees Fahrenheit, that I would write an article like this, yet here we are. It all began when I was seated in our living room and informed by my parents that they were divorcing. I was already living with them, saving money, and working a regular office job. There was no fighting or yelling during the divorce, it was just two people who had grown apart and had different goals in life. I think I handled it quite well because I had anticipated it. They were living parallel lives under one roof, and family dinners had grown infrequent. I continued our pizza and sci-fi movie habit by spending every other weekend with Dad, 59 million, who moved to an apartment across town. A year after the divorce, Mom, 59F, met my now stepfather, 57M, and everything changed drastically. One morning, she was so excited that she virtually floated home. She declared, "I've met someone special," during breakfast. "He has a daughter in college. Wouldn't it be nice to have a sister?" My stepfather and his daughter, 21F, came into our home after they were married in a matter of months. Everything began to come apart at that point. When grown-ups were present, my stepsister might have looked like an angel in her expensive clothing, but when they weren't, she was someone else. Little things were the first. The laundry would destroy my preferred work outfits. Coffee stains would inexplicably appear on important documents. My personal belongings would disappear and then reappear damaged. Even worse was my stepfather, who was often making disparaging comments about my lifestyle, appearance, and professional choices. "Don't you think that skirt's a bit short for the office?" he'd respond. Or, "Maybe if you spent less time on your phone and more time networking, you'd have a better position by now." I attempted to discuss these experiences with Mom, but she consistently dismissed my worries. She'd remark, "He's just being protective. He wants what's best for you." Over time, everything became too much to handle. I had spent weeks honing every element of a pivotal presentation while staying late at work. When I arrived home early one evening, I discovered my stepsister purposely destroying my presentation materials in my room. She had ruined my work with markers, leaving her hands smeared with ink. Things became heated when I confronted her and presented Mom and my stepfather with the evidence. The worst part? My stepfather accused me of mistreating his precious daughter, and called me a stupid. As if I were the one causing the trouble, Mom simply sat there and shook her head at me. I had trouble sleeping that night. I had made up my mind by dawn. Dad arrived to fetch me up 20 minutes after I called him. Mom came out to object as I was packing my things into his truck. She remarked, "You're overreacting? Why can't you just try to get along?" I looked over at her. "Your husband called me a fool, and you sat there silently. Your stepdaughter destroyed my work, and you did nothing. That's not overreacting, that's self-preservation." When Dad heard this, he went up to my stepfather. Security had to step in before things were physical since it heated up so quickly. It was like inhaling fresh air after being submerged when I finally moved in with Dad. It's time to stop being cautious. No more looking for sabotage in my room. A few days later, I received a note from Mom. "I can't believe you set your father against my husband like this. You're tearing this family apart." I didn't answer. Which family was she referring to? The one where I was verbally abused by her husband? Where did her stepdaughter ruin my belongings? I concentrated on my work and saving money rather than obsessing over it. I brought meals from home, while my coworkers went out for fancy lunches. I stayed late and took on more work when others went out to bars after work. I contribute a sizable amount of my monthly salary to my future home fund. I eventually purchased a home with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen with granite countertops, and a backyard where I could grow a garden after 3 years of diligent saving. It was all mine, purchased with my own funds after years of diligent effort and cautious saving. I made the decision to throw a housewarming celebration, and I made it clear that Mom could attend. But not my stepsister or stepfather. She concurred. On the day of the party, however, they were all present when I opened the door. "Surprise?" Mom whispered feebly, observing my face. As soon as he saw the hardwood flooring and crown molding, my stepfather began to critique everything, his lips quivering. His statement, "It's nice," sounded anything but. With her nose in the air, my stepsister walked around teasingly about how little the kitchen was and how she would purchase a larger home with a swimming pool. I was done. "Really? That's interesting. What job are you planning to buy it with?" She flushed. "I have prospects." When I said, "Prospects aren't paychecks. Last I heard, you were still living off your dad's credit card." My stepfather took a menacing stride forward as his face grew scarlet with anger. Mom gave me a pitying glance over her shoulder as she swiftly escorted them out after grabbing his arm. I was trembling with rage as they went, but I also felt oddly relieved. At last, I had confronted them, in my own house, according to my own rules. My true friends joined me in celebrating my accomplishment as the celebration went on. I had assumed that would be the end of it, but I had no idea that things would grow much worse. I have to go to work now, so I'll update this post tomorrow with what transpired. Is it wrong of me to confront them? In my opinion, they showed up to disparage all I've worked so hard for even though they weren't invited. First update? Since then, a lot has transpired, and I feel uneasy about my present circumstances. I had an opportunity when my supervisor called me into his office 3 months after the housewarming catastrophe. For a 2-week absence, our organization needed someone to manage a significant project at another branch. My house, especially my indoor garden, was my biggest worry, even though it was a fantastic opportunity for my job. Delicate orchids, temperamental peace lilies, and my pride and joy, a rare bird of paradise that had just begun to flower, were among the many plants I had grown during the previous few months. I couldn't stomach the idea of going back to dead plants, and each one required a different kind of care. I swallowed my pride and drove to Mom's house after weighing my options. I knew she had a green thumb, but we hadn't talked much since the housewarming incident. In addition, I believed that this might be an opportunity to mend our relationship, just Mom and me, without the involvement of my stepsister or stepfather. When I showed up at her house, she appeared astonished. "Is everything all right?" She ushered me into the kitchen and asked. I asked if she could take care of my house, especially the plants, and explained about the business trip. I should have known something was wrong because of the way her face lit up. "Obviously, with nearly too much enthusiasm," she said. "You are aware of my passion for gardening." I gave her the extra keys and thorough instructions on how to take care of each plant. She tucked the papers away after giving them a fleeting glance. She said, "Don't worry about anything. Simply concentrate on your work. Everything will be well taken care of by me." I dismissed it as my own paranoia, but there was something strange about her actions. What could go wrong after all? I thought she was just observing my plants. I told her my itinerary and emergency contacts before I left. I reminded her that I would be gone for 2 weeks. According to the schedule I jotted down, the plants just require water. Please don't invite anyone over or adjust anything. Although she gave a nod, I couldn't exactly read her face. Obviously, honey, everything will be all right. The fact that she had consented so fast in spite of our previous arguments, that she had hardly looked at the care instructions, and that she kept saying, "Everything will be fine," without addressing the plants directly, were all small details that I began to notice while I was driving home. That night, I double-checked every item in my home. Just in case, I snapped pictures of every room in my house. Despite feeling bad about not trusting my own mother, I even put a tiny security camera in my living room. I noticed Mom's car go by my street the following morning as I was packing my bags to go to the airport. She drove by carefully, as if she was checking something, without stopping or waving. She said she was merely running errands in the area when I later called her about it. I'm now writing this from my downtown hotel room. Even if the project is going well, I still feel nervous. Mom's behavior during our check-in calls has been odd. No matter what time of day I call, she always appears to be at my house. I hear strange background noises, such as TV sounds and clinking plates, which shouldn't be present if she's just dropping over to water some plants. She immediately shifted the topic when I inquired about my bird of paradise. "Everything is all right, try not to worry too much. Simply concentrate on your work." I tried to view the stream from my security camera, but it appears to have been disconnected. While watering plants, Mom says she unintentionally knocked out the cord and was unable to figure out how to plug it back in. Tonight, I spoke with Dad over the phone about my worries. He believes I'm being overly suspicious, but he also brought up Mom's behavior at the housewarming celebration. "My dear," he replied, "keep your eyes wide open. Have faith in your instincts. Even though I still have a week left, I'm thinking of shortening my trip. Am I going overboard? I simply hope I'm mistaken about everything right now." Second update. Well, that was far worse than I had anticipated. Things started to get pretty strange during my second week here, with excuses like, "in the middle of something," or "can't talk right now, everything's fine." My mom stopped returning my calls on a daily basis and instead started texting me back. I heard several people in the background when she finally picked up, including what sounded strangely like my stepsister's chuckle. The social media posts followed. Since I have blocked my stepsister, I don't typically check her accounts, but I received screenshots from a coworker who follows her. Selfies that she posted from what was obviously my kitchen were there. One caption said, "I love my new granite countertops." She was seen relaxing on my couch in another. "Watch Netflix while relaxing in my new living room." I was feeling nauseous. She had been posting these for days, according to the timestamps. She responded with heart emojis and the following when her pals inquired about her new location. I finally found my ideal home. I tried contacting Mom again right away. Directly to voicemail, I dialed the phone of my stepfather. Blocked. Even my stepsister blocked me when I attempted to phone her. I called my neighbor next door in a desperate attempt to get help. She hesitated before answering, "Oh yes. Over the past week, I've observed your sister moving things. I assumed you were aware. According to your mother, you were allowing her to stay while she recovered." I could hardly hold the phone because my hands were shaking so much. Dad was furious when I called him. "Take the next flight back home," he said. "I'll see you over there." I was able to reserve a red-eye flight, which landed shortly after midnight. The first thing I noticed when the Uber dropped me off at my house, the house I had worked so hard to purchase, was that all of the drapes had been altered. I could see strange decorations and furniture through the windows. I tried my key in the lock with shaking hands. It refused to turn. I made another attempt, this time with more caution. Nothing. Suddenly, the key that had suited my own house perfectly no longer did. At that moment, I heard footsteps strolling around my house as if they were supposed to be there. The door opened before I could call 911, and my stepsister appeared, dressed in pajamas as if she owned the house. She dared to appear irritated at my presence, and her blonde hair was in an untidy bun. "Why are you in this place?" My brain was having trouble processing what I was witnessing, so I said the words in a whisper. "Obviously, living here," she grinned. "I've been here for several weeks. While you were off playing businesswoman, Daddy helped me move in." With my suitcase still in hand, I stood there feeling angry. "This is my home. Leave. Right now." She studied her manicured nails while leaning against my doorframe. "Yes, that isn't taking place. I feel very at ease here. By the way, the water pressure in the bathroom is fantastic. Acquire. Outside. Of course, my own home." Every word had enough edge to pierce. In reaction, she slammed the door in my face and laughed, really laughed. The latch clicked, and then I heard her footsteps as she left. With my bags all about me, I stood on my own front porch, shaking with anger. The flower beds I had meticulously arranged were illuminated by the yard lights I had put. I could see my living room through the glass, but it was no longer my living room. She tossed her jacket over my couch. My hardwood floors were littered with her shoes. I took out my phone and dialed Mom, my hands shaking. She sounded sleepy as she heard the third ring. "What's the matter? What's the matter?" I nearly let out a yell. "I just got home to find my stepsister living in my house. She says she's been here for weeks. Tell her to get out right now, or I'm calling the police." "Don't contact the police, please." Mom's voice changed from drowsy to frantic. "We'll be over. Just wait there, please. What other place should I go? I can't get out of my own home." The next half hour was the longest I've ever experienced. I watched the lights in the houses next to mine turn on as I paced back and forth on my front porch. Seeing me out here in the middle of the night, what did they think? A few automobiles passed slowly, perhaps debating whether to make their own police call. At last, Mom's vehicle arrived, driven by my stepfather. Still wearing their jammies beneath their coats, they hurried out. "What's happening?" I confronted Mom and made a demand. "Why is my stepsister in possession of my house keys? Why do you allow her to reside here?" At least Mom had the grace to appear uneasy. "She needed a place to stay, honey. She was unable to pay the rent increase when her lease expired. Your home was just sitting there, unoccupied." "Just sitting there? Vacant? It's my home. You weren't entitled." As if it clarified everything, Mom added, "The girl needed somewhere to live. Anyway, your house is too large for one person." I kept my eyes on my mother's face, hoping for some recognition of how totally she had violated my confidence. Rather, she only stood there, offering justifications for the unacceptable. As always when I was younger, my stepfather went forward with his chest puffed out. "Look, telling you about her moving in was pointless. You would have simply refused?" I would have said no, of course. I can't even enter my own home since the locks have been changed. "Anyway, they needed to be changed," he replied, dismissively waving his hand. "I was kind to you." I gaped at him in shock. "You know that's against the law, don't you? Changing the locks on someone else's property is not an option." He sneered. "Legal, illegal. It's finished now. This house is too large for just you, and she needs somewhere to stay." I whispered, lowering my voice to a perilous whisper. "Get her out. Get her out of here or I'll call the cops." That recognizable sneer twisted my stepfather's cheeks. "You're not going to do it." Mom moved forward, her hands clenched. "That's it if you call the police. I'll never talk to you again. Do you want it that way? To utterly ruin this family?" I let forth a rough, acrid laugh. "This family? Do you mean the time you allowed your husband to occupy my home without permission? That household?" Rather than answer, they turned and left me there with my bags as they entered my house. With a last click, the door shut behind them. As I took out my phone, my hand stopped shaking. Don't hesitate any longer. No more attempting to maintain harmony. Even though Dad believes I made the correct decision, I can't get Mom's vow to never talk to me again out of my mind. Third update. When I dialed 911, things proceeded swiftly. 2 police cars with bright lights arrived in less than 20 minutes. I told the officers what was going on, and the neighbors were clearly awake now, watching from behind their curtains. "Are you the legitimate owner?" the officer inquired. Using my phone, I retrieved the property records and screenshots of my stepsister's social media posts demonstrating her move into her new place. I said, "Yes, I do have all the paperwork. I gave my mother a key so she could water my plants while I was gone on business. Rather, they changed all the locks and moved my stepsister in." The doorbell was rung by the officer. After a long silence, there were shuffles coming from within. The door opened at last. As they stood there, my mother, stepfather, and stepsister made a vain attempt to project confidence. "Good evening," said the cop. "Everyone inside must provide identification and proof of residency." My stepfather took the stage, speaking in his most convincing business voice. "There was a miscommunication. My daughter is permitted to remain here by my stepdaughter. She is attempting to stir trouble after they had a falling out." "That is untrue," I interrupted. "I never granted authorization. While I was out on business, they exploited me." "Inquire about the locks. They will acknowledge that they altered them without telling me." The first thing my stepfather said was, "The old locks were defective." "You admit that you changed the locks without the homeowner's consent?" The officer paused to take notes. My stepsister came forward, dread taking the place of her previous arrogance. "Daddy assured me things would be all right. He claimed that after she grew accustomed to the concept, she wouldn't mind. Changing locks on someone else's property and occupying their home without permission constitutes illegal entry," the officer replied, glaring at my stepfather. "We will need to request that you and your daughter visit the station." Mom burst into tears. "This is simply a family issue, please, we can resolve this. Your husband and stepdaughter have admitted to changing locks and occupying property without the owner's consent," the officer sternly retorted. "It is illegal to do so." After that, everything occurred pretty fast. As they escorted my stepsister to the patrol car, she began to cry. For the first time, my stepfather remained silent despite his fury turning his face crimson. As they took her husband and daughter away, Mom shook on the porch. I called an emergency locksmith with the authorities' assistance, and he came an hour later. Mom eventually spoke as he sought to get me back into my own house. "How were you able to?" She hardly raised her voice above a whisper. "How could you harm your own family in this way?" Looking at her, this lady who had spent years choosing everyone else over me, I felt oddly at ease. "You stated long ago that they were your true family, Mom," I murmured softly. "You sat there silently the day she ruined my work presentation. The day you turned away when he called me derogatory names. They treated me like trash every time you told me to be the bigger person. They were the ones you repeatedly selected. They will now have criminal histories?" she cried. "Was it what you were looking for?" I answered, "I wanted my mother to protect me. My goal was to feel secure in my own house. The only thing I wanted was for you to pick me." After completing his task, the locksmith gave me the replacement keys. I tested them in the lock as Mom watched. "From now on, you are no longer my daughter," she declared, her voice trembling with rage. "You have no right to ruin our family in this way." For the last time, I looked at her. "The day you decided that your new spouse and his daughter were more significant than your own child, you ruined our family. I just quit allowing you all to mistreat me." She climbed into her vehicle and drove off. I entered my home, my transformed, violated home. All of my lovely plants had died from carelessness. My beloved bird of paradise was also wilted and brown. My stepsister had filled my cabinets with her belongings and reorganized everything in the kitchen. Designer clothes were all over my spare bedroom, which had been transformed into her personal closet. Later that day, the police made a call. They wanted to know whether I would file a complaint. I considered forgiveness, family loyalty, and Mom's tears. Then I recalled being gaslighted, abused, and told to just take it. "Yes," I firmly said. "I wish to file charges." In a frightening email, my stepfather threatened to sue me for his daughter's psychological suffering. Without replying, I sent it to my attorney. On social media, my stepsister made evasive posts about toxic people who pretend to be victims, but I suppressed her accounts. Over the weekend, I thoroughly cleaned my house to remove any evidence of their presence. I started over after discarding the dead plants. I installed better cameras and changed all the security codes with the help of Dad and his girlfriend. Mom sent one last text last night, saying, "I hope you're happy with what you've done. I blocked her number since you've ruined everything." Fourth update. A lot has transpired since my last update, which was a few months ago. The court case proceeded more quickly than anticipated. Rather than risk a trial, both my stepsister and my stepfather accepted plea agreements. They were both placed on probation and mandated to reimburse me for the expense of replacing the locks and for the damage they caused to my residence. Above all, they have a legal obligation to avoid my property. In court, my stepsister attempted to play the victim by claiming that she was only doing what her father had told her to do and was unaware that it was against the law. The judge was unimpressed, particularly after seeing her boastful social media posts about her new house. Until the very end, my stepfather remained haughty, accusing his lawyer of being spiteful and disrespectful. Mom attended the court sessions, but she sat beside them. She never gave me a glance. She made an attempt to approach me in the parking lot following the sentencing. "Are you happy now?" she inquired. "Your stepsister has a criminal record because of you. Is this retaliation?" I felt nothing except sympathy when I looked at her, actually looked at her. "Mom, this is not retaliation. This is the result. They moved in without my consent after breaking into my house and changing my locks. How could that be acceptable?" As usual, Mom said, she needed a place to stay. I answered, "Then you ought to have allowed her to remain with you. Or assisted her in locating a residence of her own. You decided to steal mine instead." As she normally does when she loses an argument, she breaks down in tears. "You have my undying forgiveness for this. This family has been ripped apart by you." I maintain my composure. "No, Mother. When you decided that their enjoyment was more important than my well-being years ago, you tore this family apart. I'm just at last advocating for myself. I ran into my aunt at the grocery store last week. She made an effort to guilt-trip me by claiming that Mom was having trouble adjusting to our distance from one another and that I ought to try to make amends. I informed her that some bridges must remain burned. I'm getting better sleep now. The more time passes, the less I anxiously check my phone for alerts from my new security system. The sunlight coming through my windows is helping my new plants grow. I'm going to see Dad and his girlfriend next month, and they call frequently. Out of habit, I occasionally find myself reaching for the phone to contact Mom, but the temptation is quickly squelched when I recall that night on my doorstep when I was locked out of my own house. My mother passed away years ago when she decided to prioritize her new family over me, so losing her isn't the worst part. Accepting that she will never comprehend what she did wrong is the most difficult aspect. In his last threatening email, my stepfather discussed family loyalty and how I had betrayed them through his attorney. One word was my lawyer's response. Family loyalty should have started with respecting my client's property rights. I've changed my phone number, installed cameras throughout my house, and blocked them on all platforms. This may seem extreme to others, but I'm not taking any chances in light of what they did. I've decided to sever all communication with them. Life continues. Last week, I received a promotion at work. The plants they killed are being replaced by new ones, and my garden is growing again. I recently started seeing someone who respects my limits and is aware of my trust concerns. There are some bridges that must remain burned. Sometimes severing links is the only healthy option, not just a choice. This is going to be my last update on the matter. It's time to put this chapter behind me and concentrate on starting a new life. A life free of poisonous relatives. Without being overly cautious. Without sacrificing my personal limits for those who have never honored them. I am at liberty.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
My parents chose my brother over me, hid my inheritance, and now seek my help after his fraudulent betrayal. My parents supported my brother after he slapped me during my son's birthday celebration. When he attempted to take their house, which was actually mine, years later, they pleaded for assistance. Eric, my younger brother, is 28 million, and I am 35 million. Favoritism was so blatant in our home while I was growing up that it was painful. My parents behaved as though Eric was a priceless treasure that had to be safeguarded at all costs from the moment of his birth, while I was just there. I still recall my 10th birthday celebration being cancelled due to Eric's cold. They couldn't risk him feeling excluded from the festivities because he only had a cold, not even a fever. As we aged, things only got worse. I was the debate team captain, a straight A student, and even received a partial scholarship for my SAT results. My parents, however, hardly noticed. They were too preoccupied in complimenting Eric on passing his classes with C grades. The same thing happened at every parent-teacher conference. They would ignore my accomplishments and concentrate on how they could support Eric in doing better. At the age of 18, I moved away with the intention of succeeding without their continual comparison. I earned a degree in computer science, worked several jobs to pay for education, and got a fantastic position at a software business. I met my wife, Darla, 33F, there. She is intelligent, kind, and, in contrast to my family, She genuinely acknowledges my accomplishments. James is our 1-year-old kid, and we were married 5 years ago. Eric, however, never left the house. After 1 semester, he left community college because it was too stressful, and returned home. At the age of 28, he continues to live with our parents and works part-time at a nearby video game store. He spends much of his time playing video games. This is entirely made possible by my parents. They cover all of his expenses, including his meals, bills, auto insurance, and game subscriptions. My mother literally broke down in tears when I suggested that Eric might want to look for a full-time job, saying that I was being too harsh on her sensitive little boy. We threw James's first birthday celebration at my parents' place last month. They insisted, even though I didn't want to. Mom remarked that being a part of his nephew's special day would mean a lot to Eric. In an attempt to maintain harmony, I accepted even though I should have known better. The celebration got off to a decent start. We used streamers and balloons to adorn the garden. James was enjoying himself greatly in the company of his loved ones. Up until lunchtime, everything was going smoothly. I was searching the crowd for Darla after stuffing my plate full of food. At that moment, it occurred. Eric was standing just behind me as I turned around and unintentionally ran into him. His new limited edition gaming t-shirt got some of my food, which was pasta with marinara sauce, on it. Since I understood that gaming gear can be pricey, I instantly apologized and offered to buy him a new shirt or even pay for dry cleaning. Eric flipped out rather than accept my apology. He began to yell that I always ruin everything for him as his face flushed. He cited instances from our early years when he claimed that I intentionally attempted to harm him, such as when I broke his game console by tripping over its wire. I was 12, he was 5, or when I received the last piece of pizza at his 10th birthday celebration. I hadn't eaten all day because I was helping set up his party. The room fell silent. We had everyone's attention. Eric gave me a forceful slap across the face before I could fight myself. The room was silent as the sound reverberated. My cheek ached, but the next thing that transpired hurt even more. My mother hurried over to fuss over Eric, not to see how I was doing. She began to inquire about his well-being and whether he required ice for his hand after he slapped me. As though I had done something wrong, my dad simply stood there with his arms crossed and gave me a disapproving look. I surveyed the space. James, who had begun to weep from the chaos, was being held by my wife, who was standing there in shock. While some people glanced away awkwardly, others murmured to each other. I stood there with a red mark on my cheek, and there was Eric, being comforted by our mother. I asked my parents whether they truly approved of their son being beaten at his own child's birthday celebration when I had finally found my voice. My mother's reaction? "You're older, you should know better. Look what you did to his new shirt. You know how much he loves his gaming merchandise, he's saved up for weeks to buy that." I lost it at that point. Years of repressed annoyance were released. I told them that throughout his life, they had allowed Eric to act in this way. They had never reprimanded him, encouraged him to improve, or held him responsible for anything. I brought up the fact that, at 28, he was still living at home and playing video games, when I had put a lot of effort into building my life since I was 18. I explained that Eric had a gaming tournament that day, thus they had missed my college graduation. How they were so preoccupied with making sure Eric didn't feel excluded that they hardly assisted with my wedding. How Eric felt uncomfortable around infants, thus they had only been to see James twice since he was born. If I couldn't respect my brother, my dad became irate and urged me to leave their home. That's exactly what I did. I told my wife we were going, scooped up my son, and left. "Look how upset Eric is now," was the reason my mother broke down in tears, not the fact that I was going. The calls and messages began to come in later that day. I had to apologize to Eric, my parents informed me over the phone. He apparently locked himself in his room and wouldn't go because he was so unhappy about his damaged shirt. Some family members called to let me know that I should have recognized Eric's sensitivity and refrained from provoking him by spilling food on him. According to other texts, I was being dramatic about a little slap, and should be more understanding because I'm the older brother. Eric, my parents, and the family members who stood up for him were all blocked by me. Some relatives who were present at the time of the incident expressed their support for me, stating that they had always seen how unfairly I was treated but had refrained from speaking out to prevent creating a scene. Too late, too little. Now, a month has passed. My wife completely agrees with my decision to cut off communication. She stated that she never wants James to believe that hitting people is acceptable or that he must put up with abuse because it originates from his family. Some family members claim that since Eric is my younger brother, I should forgive him and that I am being too harsh. However, I fail to see why, simply because we are related, I should continue to put up with mistreatment. First update. I haven't communicated with my family in 2 years. The absence of their incessant drama has brought tranquility to life. At 3 years old, James is doing well. In addition, we have a 6-month-old daughter named Emma. In addition to purchasing a larger home and receiving advancements at work, Darla and I have been content with our lives as a family of 4. Everything changed last week when I received a call from an unidentified number. My mother was crying uncontrollably. Her cries made it difficult for me to grasp what she was saying at first. I was shocked by what I heard when she eventually relaxed enough to talk. Eric was selling their house after somehow getting it transferred into his name. They had been given 2 weeks to vacate by him. There was nowhere for them to go. But the biggest shock wasn't even that. I was stunned to learn that the house had truly always been in my name. Mom says my grandfather left the house to me in his will when he died 15 years ago. I had just started college at the age of 20. Due to their own plans, my parents never disclosed this inheritance to me. In an attempt to persuade me to give the house to Eric when he was more stable, they had been waiting for the right time to tell me that they wanted Eric to ultimately own it. They resided in my house for 15 years without claiming it as their own. They allowed Eric to live there for free for 15 years while I worked several jobs to pay for my own place. While they saw me struggle to save for a down payment on my first home, they kept this a secret for 15 years. Mom started sobbing as she talked about how they never imagined Eric would turn on them in this way. He had been behaving oddly for several months, apparently. He had begun discussing moving to a different state to live with some buddies who played online games. They required funds for streaming equipment and a game setup. At that point, he began inquiring about who owned the residence. How Eric was able to get the house registered in his name is still a mystery to me. He took care of the paperwork during their trip last month, according to Mom, who kept saying it. I can only presume he falsified my signature because I never signed any transfer forms. The situation's irony is nearly comical. Since the house was genuinely mine, the same parents who evicted me from their home 2 years ago are now pleading with me for assistance. The brother who attacked me during my son's birthday celebration has now betrayed them by attempting to take my belongings. Mom talked on the phone for an hour about how they were going to be homeless and that they had nowhere else to go because they had spent all of their savings on Eric over the years, including paying for his failed college attempt, purchasing his gaming gear, paying for his insurance and car payments, and even paying for his convention attendance. She also disclosed that Eric's behavior worsened after I stopped communicating with him. He declared he was going to become a professional gamer and completely quit his job. He played games all day and streamed to his modest internet fan base at night. He would have tantrums, smash things, and threaten to move out when they suggested he look for a job. My father also picked up the phone. He attempted to defend their conduct by claiming that they just had their 2 sons' best interests in mind, that they had intended to ultimately notify me about the bequest, and that they never imagined Eric would act in such a way. He even went so far as to suggest that perhaps none of this would have occurred if I had kept in touch. Without saying anything, I hung up. I received more calls from different family members pleading with me to assist my parents. Some people made an effort to guilt-trip me by bringing up their advanced age and vulnerability. Others said I was being just as evil as Eric by not helping them. Darla believes that since they are still my parents and appear to sincerely regret their situation, we ought to assist them, but I find it difficult to sympathize. For 15 years, they misled me about my own property. While I put a lot of effort into purchasing my own home, they let their golden child to reside there for free. When he attacked me in front of my family, they stood up for him. The only reason they contacted me now was to ask for something. To find out how Eric was able to get the house in his name, I got in touch with a lawyer. The attorney attested to the fact that my grandfather's will did, in fact, leave me the house. Because I never signed any transfer forms, she is investigating the documents Eric used to transfer the property and concludes that his claim to the house would not stand up in court. She added that we could file a lawsuit against him for forgery. I'm unsure right now. Since my parents are still my parents in spite of everything, I have a part of me that wants to help them. However, I also believe that they deserve this because they deceived me and allowed Eric to continue doing so for so long. Perhaps this is the wake-up call they've been waiting for to realize the true nature of their beloved golden child. First update. Although it wasn't simple, my lawyer assisted me in regaining the residence. Yes, Eric had falsified my signature on a number of documents. Additionally, he falsely claimed to have my power of attorney while lying to other agencies. After nearly 3 months of legal proceedings, Eric has been evicted and the house is once again in my name. I gained additional knowledge regarding what truly transpired during the court processes. For months, Eric had been organizing this. He had discovered my grandfather's will while searching through our parents' old papers. He began looking into ways to transfer property ownership after realizing the house was legally mine. He even used a fictitious name to join some internet communities on real estate fraud. The quality of the fake documents was very high. According to my attorney, Eric ought to have had assistance from a property law expert. Later on, we discovered that he had been using money he borrowed from our parents to pay an internet consultant, claiming the money was for gaming equipment. Eric lost it all when the police arrived to evict him. He locked himself in his room and wouldn't leave. After hours of haggling, he eventually agreed to go when the door was threatened to be broken. He would not stop yelling that we were all out to destroy his life and that everyone was against him. I was urged by my parents to allow them to remain in the house. After obtaining my location from a family member, they arrived at my house and genuinely collapsed in the driveway. "They have nowhere else to go," Mom said, sobbing. Dad was crying, something I had never seen him do before, and he was apologizing for keeping the truth about my inheritance a secret. They acknowledged that they had used up all of their retirement funds on Eric, including loans they had taken out to finance his gaming career, costly gaming settings, car payments, insurance, and the tuition for the one semester he attended college. They had genuinely thought that one day he would succeed as a streamer and repay them. At last, Dad acknowledged that they had overindulged Eric. He claimed that over the years, they had observed indications of his manipulative behavior but had consistently made excuses for him. They believed he would eventually mature and become responsible if they provided him with adequate time, resources, and support. Mom disclosed the ways in which Eric had deceived them on the house transfer. He had persuaded them that it was merely a formality to assist him in launching a gaming company. He assured them that after he became a successful streamer, he would look after them forever. They wanted to be sure their baby boy wouldn't turn on them, so they trusted him. Darla and I talked it over, and I agreed to let them stay under certain restrictions. In order to remind them that they are living in my home, they must first pay rent, which is not market rate because they are now on a fixed income. Second, if they wish to have any kind of contact with me or their grandchildren, they must go to family therapy. Third, without my express consent, they are never allowed to let Eric into the house. The eviction was not well received by Eric. He began threatening everyone, including Darla, our parents, and myself. He accused me of turning our parents against him and wrecking his life. Since it was his home, and he had nowhere else to go, he insisted that I allow him to return. I kept all of his threatening messages in case we needed them later, and I banned his number. Eric was couch surfing at his gaming pals' houses when I last heard from him. His ambitious intentions to move in with his online pals apparently fell through when they discovered he was broke. Since he is my brother, other family members advised me to assist him, but I declined. He attempted to use forgeries and fraud to steal my residence. In my opinion, he is no longer my brother. Third update. It has been an interesting 6 months. As agreed upon, my parents have been going to therapy and paying their rent on time. Although it's a gradual process, they are attempting to mend our friendship. There are fresh disclosures every week regarding the various ways in which their partiality harmed both of their boys. At last, Mom acknowledged that they felt bad for allowing Eric. It seems that they were having financial difficulties when Eric was born, so they were unable to provide him with the same luxuries that I enjoyed throughout my early years. They began to overindulge him in order to make up for it. What began as purchasing him additional toys evolved into a lifetime of condoning misbehavior. During one therapy session, Dad lost it when he saw how their behavior made Eric into an entitled monster and drove me away. He acknowledged that they secretly knew I would be all right because I was a responsible and diligent worker. They therefore gave Eric their whole attention because they believed he required greater support to thrive in life. Eric wrote me a long email last month. He asserted that he had also been going to therapy and had come to terms with his errors. He claims that after being evicted, he reached his lowest point. His streaming career never took off, and none of his gaming pals wanted to take him in permanently. He currently shares an apartment with 3 roommates and works at a warehouse. Eric apologized in the email for everything, trying to steal the house, faking my signature, and assaulting James on his birthday. He claimed that treatment enabled him to see how his perspective of the world had been distorted by his parents' partiality. He promised to pay the rent this time and asked if he may live with our parents again. I turned down his request. I sent the email to my attorney, who suggested that I stop communicating with him because of his track record of deceit and deception. Even though I inherited the house, I worked hard to obtain everything else in my life. Even if he says he has changed, I will no longer tolerate his behavior. I continue to face criticism from some family members for charging my elderly parents rent. They claim that I'm being unkind and that families ought to provide unpaid support to one another. However, this is about boundaries and consequences, not money. My parents only expressed regret when they wanted something from me, allowed my brother to be abused, and concealed my inheritance for 15 years. They're fortunate that I'm allowing them to remain at all. Mom still occasionally remarks about Eric's difficulties. She said last week that he might lose his car because he couldn't afford his car payment. I quickly put an end to that by telling her that he is an adult who attempted to defraud me out of my house. If they wish to, they can assist him, but not while residing in my home. Darla says we should ask them to dinner occasionally so they can see their grandchildren, but she believes I'm being fair. Every now and then, James inquires about his grandparents. I'm thinking about it, but I'm not yet prepared for frequent family get-togethers. The treachery is still too recent. This setup works for the time being. I have authority over my property, my parents have a secure place to live, and Eric is at last coming to terms with the repercussions of his behavior. Clear limits and punishments can sometimes improve family relationships. I've discovered that being family does not entail being exploited by others. It entails respecting one another's limits and being accountable to one another. The conclusion.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.